Hi, my name is Sarah, and I'm 26 years old. I lost my parents in a tragic car accident when I was just a child, leaving me without any family to turn to. I spent 3 years in an orphanage before being adopted by a couple who, as fate would have it, were billionaires. Overnight, my life changed completely. They gave me everything I could ever need: love, stability, and opportunities beyond my wildest dreams. But despite their wealth, they preferred to keep my adoption private, believing in quiet generosity rather than public recognition. When I turned 18, I moved into my own place, ready to start my independent life. Around the same time, my adoptive parents became even more immersed in their business, frequently traveling across Europe in search of new ventures. That was when I met Mark, my now ex-husband. We were in college when we crossed paths, and there was an instant connection between us. Mark was warm, caring, and easy to talk to. As we spent more time together, our bond deepened, and soon enough, we became a couple. Everything felt perfect, except for one looming issue: his family. I had never met them, but I knew they wouldn't approve of me. Mark came from old money, and his parents had a strict, elitist mindset. He had warned me they were critical of who their children dated, and that made me anxious. Still, I didn't expect just how bad things would be. After 4 years together and now engaged, Mark finally decided it was time for me to meet his parents. He wanted to introduce me when we were both financially stable, hoping it would make a difference, but deep down, he knew they wouldn't approve, and I could sense his unease. The night before, I couldn't shake my nerves. "They're going to hate me," I admitted. "They won't," Mark insisted. "You really think they won't judge me even more when they find out we're engaged?" I challenged. He sighed. "Even if they do, it won't change anything between us." Still unsure, I hesitated. "Should we hold off on telling them? Maybe we can ease them into it. If that makes you more comfortable, then we can wait." He agreed without hesitation. I decided to keep the engagement hidden for now. I wanted a fair chance to win them over, even though Mark often doubted that was possible. The meeting was set at an upscale restaurant, the kind where the prices weren't listed on the menu. As we walked in, Mark held my hand reassuringly, but my heart pounded. To keep our engagement under wraps, I had slipped my ring onto a delicate chain around my neck. Things went south the moment we arrived, 2 minutes late. Mark had warned me his parents valued punctuality, but I hadn't realized they'd take it as a personal offense. They greeted Mark with polite nods, but barely spared me a glance. Their indifference was cutting, and I suddenly felt like an outsider in a world I didn't belong to. "Mom, Dad, this is Sarah, my girlfriend," Mark said firmly, his grip tightening on my hand. I forced a polite smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you both." His mother barely looked at me. "Hi," she said curtly. Her sharp gaze settled on me, and the interrogation began. "So, Sarah," she said, her voice smooth but laced with condescension, "Mark tells me you met in college?" "Yes, we did," I answered, trying to keep my tone light. "We had a few classes together." His father cut in, his tone sharp. "A prestigious school like that isn't easy to get into. How did you manage it?" "Dad, stop," Mark interjected, irritation creeping into his voice. His mother frowned. "It's a fair question, Sarah, do answer." I took a steadying breath. I was fortunate enough to receive a full scholarship. It was a life-changing opportunity, and of course, meeting Mark was one of the best things that came from it. His mother scoffed. "I'm sure it was. Mark is successful, after all, and given your circumstances, I imagine that was quite the upgrade." Her words stung, but what came next was worse. "At least you seem intelligent," she continued with a smirk, "because, well, your looks certainly aren't what got you here." Mark shot up from his seat, his voice tight with anger. "That's enough, we're leaving." Grabbing my hand, he pulled me away from the table before I could even process what had just happened. My heart pounded as we left the restaurant in stunned silence. I had expected judgment, but not cruelty. The car ride home was quiet, the tension thick. Mark's hands gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white with frustration. Once we got home, he finally turned to me, his voice gentle despite his anger. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, but I wasn't okay. I didn't even know how to feel. I had done everything right, dressed carefully, spoken politely, and even avoided ordering anything expensive, yet none of it mattered. Abigail and Charles had judged me before I even spoke a word. After that disastrous dinner, Mark cut off contact with his parents for weeks. They sent him a terse message, calling us disrespectful for walking out, but he ignored it. When he finally replied a month later, Informing them of our engagement, their reaction was explosive. Furious, they made their stance clear: they didn't approve of me, and they never would. Mark warned them that he wouldn't tolerate any more insults, and in a reluctant attempt at reconciliation, they offered to pay for our wedding, but only if they controlled every detail. Neither of us wanted that, so we eloped instead. My adoptive parents, still overseas, supported our decision wholeheartedly. They were just happy to see me happy. As a wedding gift, they sent us an expensive painting. Mark raised an eyebrow at its value, but I brushed it off. My parents were generous, and money wasn't an issue for them. Not long after our wedding, Abigail and Charles surprised us by inviting me to their anniversary party. A small part of me dared to hope maybe this was their way of making amends. Maybe they were finally willing to accept me. I was wrong. The moment we arrived, it was clear I wasn't welcome. The 30 or so guests followed Abigail and Charles's lead, pretending I didn't exist. Every attempt I made to join a conversation was met with cold indifference. People either gave me a once-over before turning away or carried on talking to Mark as if I hadn't spoken at all. By the end of the night, I felt completely humiliated. Then came the toast. Abigail raised her glass, smiling as she looked around the room. "We're so grateful to be surrounded by the people who matter most," she said sweetly. Laughter rippled through the crowd, pointed, deliberate. I felt my stomach drop. I couldn't do this. I couldn't sit there and endure their cruelty, pretending it didn't hurt. Without a word, I ordered an Uber and left, tears blurring my vision as I rode home alone. Mark came home later that night, his face tight with anger. "Why did you walk out like that?" he demanded. "Do you know how embarrassing that was for me?" I stared at him, stunned. "What are you talking about?" My voice trembled. "Don't play dumb, Sarah. I had to listen to my parents yell at me for hours while everyone pitied me for being married to you." A cold wave of disbelief washed over me. "Are you serious? What about me, Mark?" I shot back. "I was humiliated by everyone there. Your parents mocked me in front of their guests. How can you expect me to just sit there and take that?" "I'm not saying it was right," he said, frustrated, "but you could have dealt with it for one night. It was their anniversary, for God's sake. You have no idea what it feels like to be treated like that," I whispered. Everyone was laughing at me. His expression hardened. "My parents expect an apology from you." I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "An apology? From me? I want one from them first. They humiliated me." Mark's jaw tightened. "Maybe my parents were right about you," he said coldly. "You're impossible." With that, he stormed off to the guest bedroom. Something inside me cracked. Mark had always stood up for me before. Was this really how he felt? Was it so unbearable for him after I left? Couldn't he see that walking away had been my only way of protecting myself? The silence between us stretched into a week. Mark barely spoke to me, while his parents flooded my phone with messages, calling me ungrateful and an embarrassment. Desperate to fix things, I swallowed my pride. I didn't want our marriage to crumble over this, so, despite everything, I apologized. But it didn't matter. Abigail and Charles began hosting weekly family dinners, and Mark insisted on attending. I went with him the first time, hoping things would be different. They weren't. The tension in the house was suffocating. Mark's father and siblings barely acknowledged me. Mark drifted away to catch up with his family, leaving me standing alone. Then Abigail appeared. Her expression was stormy, her gaze sharp as a blade. When she saw me, her lips curled into a sneer. "What are you doing here?" I blinked, taken aback. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." She took a step closer. "What are you doing in my house right now?" I swallowed, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Well, you invited us for dinner." "Wrong. I invited Mark." I stiffened. "As Mark's wife, I'm part of this family, am I not?" Abigail scoffed. "Absolutely not. An orphan like you deserves no place in this family. Did you think you could hide that from us? We do background checks on our children's spouses. And you, Sarah, are nowhere near my son's league." The words hit like a slap. I had known, deep down, that she didn't respect me, but this was beyond cruelty. And suddenly, I realized, no matter what I did, I would never be enough for them. And maybe, just maybe, I was starting to see that Mark wasn't, either. "I will never accept you here," Abigail spat, her words laced with venom. I felt the lump in my throat as I gathered my strength, refusing to let her words break me. "Why not? Is that really the only thing that determines whether I belong in your family?" My voice was steady, despite the storm swirling inside. "You're judging me for my background. For things I had no control over. Does it not matter that I love your son, and I make him happy? She sneered, her eyes narrowing with disdain. Happiness? If that could make someone rich, the world would be full of billionaires. You're ugly, poor, and you'll never fit into our elite circles. The sting of her words hit me like a slap, but I held my ground. Why are you being so superficial? Are you afraid I'll damage your precious reputation? You never even gave me a chance to prove who I am. Abigail's smile twisted into something cruel. Sarah, that's enough, she snapped, shoving a thick wad of cash into my hands. Take this and get yourself a new life. Leave, now. I turned to Mark, hoping for some kind of support, some sign that he would stand up for me, but he said nothing. He just stood there, silent, and in that moment, the weight of his inaction crushed me more than his mother's words ever could. With tears burning in my eyes, I grabbed the money and left, feeling the hollowness in my chest expand with every step. The Uber ride home was a blur of pain and heartbreak. Mark's silence that night felt like a wall between us, and as days turned into weeks, that wall only grew taller. He refused to talk to me, acting like I was the one at fault for standing up for myself, even as his parents used my past as a weapon to tear me down. For the first time in our marriage, I felt utterly alone. The weekly family dinners continued without me. At first, the empty seat at the table was a sharp reminder of my exclusion, but eventually, I began to find solace in the silence of my own home. One night, when I couldn't stand it anymore, I reached out to my parents, desperate for comfort. Hey, sweetheart, my dad's warm voice greeted me when he answered. How's everything going? I tried to keep it together, but the tears came anyway. It's not great, I admitted, my voice quivering. What's wrong, honey? My mom's concern was immediate. If you need help, you know we're always here for you. I took a shaky breath and finally let it all spill out. Mark's family, they're awful, they're wealthy and snobby, and they've made it their mission to humiliate me. His mother even called me an orphan, to my face. My mom gasped. She said, "What? How dare she insult you like that? Do they not know about us?" My dad asked, his voice simmering with anger. No, I never told them, I confessed, my words heavy with shame. I didn't want them to like me because of my background. I wanted to be judged for who I am. Sweetheart, my mom said, her voice gentle but firm, are you sure this is the man you want to be with? I love him, I replied, my heart breaking, but I can't live like this. Don't worry, Dad said, his voice filled with determination. We'll handle this. Your mom and I are coming to visit next week, and we'll set things straight. Their words felt like a lifeline. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. When my parents arrived, they treated me to a spa day, telling me I deserved to be pampered. While I was being spoiled, they set their plan into motion. The following evening, they arrived unannounced at the family dinner Mark's parents were hosting at an upscale restaurant. From what I later heard, the atmosphere shifted the moment my dad walked in. Abigail and Charles's faces drained of color, their smug expressions faltering. Mr. Larry, Charles stammered, what brings you here? My dad's smile was cool and composed. Oh, I just happened to see some familiar faces and thought I'd say hello. Familiar faces? Abigail asked, confusion clouding her features. Yes, my daughter's-in-laws, Dad replied, glancing around. But where is Sarah? Your daughter? Abigail stammered, her face paling. Sarah is your daughter? Yes, she is, Dad said, his tone pointed. My wife and I adopted her years ago. I understand she's been having some issues with you. Abigail stammered, trying to defend herself. She hid this from us. If we'd known. Dad cut her off sharply. She didn't want special treatment because of her background, but now I see why she felt the need to shield herself from people like you. Then, turning to Mark, he handed him a folder. These are divorce papers. My daughter deserves better than this. And with that, my parents left. The fallout was swift. Dad's business associates, influential figures in their field, began pulling their support from Charles's company. The empire they'd spent years building began to unravel, bit by bit. Mark signed the divorce papers without a fight. The cruel messages from his parents flooded my phone, but I felt no anger, only relief. My parents and I took a long vacation afterward, giving me the time I needed to heal and rediscover myself. Losing Mark was painful, but I knew deep down that I had made the right choice. In the end, I learned an important lesson. I deserve love, respect, and acceptance, and I will never settle for anything less. I'll always be grateful to my parents for showing me my worth and helping me reclaim my life.